Hello, today we are talking with Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, historian, sociologist and a businessman. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
You conducted a famous now study about the psychology of super rich people, multimillionaires and billionaires. So let me start this with how, according to you, do rich people think? Is there a specific mindset, psychological traits or attitudes behind financial success, or maybe not, and they just happened to end up in such a position?
Yes, this was the topic of my second doctoral dissertation, the psychology of super rich people, their personality traits. And of course, rich people or very rich people, they are rich because they act different than average people. If they would do the same as everyone else, the results wouldn't be different from everyone else. And they act different because they think different, because they have different attitudes and different personality traits. And there was not scientific research about this topic. Of course, there are many books how to grow rich and so on, but they are not science-based. And this is the difference between a lot of other books and my research.
Okay, but when you are talking that people get rich because they act and think differently, do you mean that it is would you say the psychological factors are the only or the main reason that those people get rich, or this is just one of the components and you need to fulfill a set of other prerequisitions?
What do you think? What could be other factors? Let's discuss them.
Okay, let's say a lot of people would argue or would think that rich people are starting in their lives in different positions that a lot of other people, right? I think this is a common view on this. So let me ask it this way. How big of a factor are psychological factors in their road to success, comparing to, for example, how wealthy their parents were, or how wealthy or how good education they got, and things like that?
Okay, let's speak first about the family background.
Mm-hmm.
Family background, for my interviews, there were only very few with rich parents, and there were also only very few with a working class background. Most of them had a middle class background. So in a lot of cases, their parents were independent. So like they had a small business or something like this. Not this way that they had a big company or that they were rich, but in a lot of cases, their parents didn't work as employees, but they had their own small business. So I think the family background in this way, maybe it is important because they had the idea to become self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have for generations, like in my family, your parents, your grandfather, and everyone was maybe civil servant or worked as an employee, then maybe it's not so likely that you have the idea to become self-employed. But if you see it with your parents, maybe this is one factor. If you speak about education, about university, one of the questions I asked my interviewees was how they were at school or university. And there was absolutely no correlation between their performance at school and university on the one hand and their later financial success on the other hand. Of course, there were some that were very good at school, but there were also others who didn't even have a high school degree or were very bad at school. One of the richest I spoke with, he was absolutely a loser in school, and he had even no high school degree and nothing else. So there was absolutely no correlation. No, I think what was more important than their performance at school were the things that they did outside school, alongside school. I give you 2 examples. Half of them were competitive athletes. So it means as competitive athletes, they learned how to win, and much more important, they learned how to lose, how to handle defeats and setbacks. So this was very important. This was true for half of them. And another thing that was striking, a lot of them were engaged in early entrepreneurial activities. Even when they were at school or at university, they started to do their own small business, or they started to sell things. A lot of them sailed. Whatever you can imagine, insurance policies or real estate investment fund shares, or one sold used cars or used motorcycles or whatever. So I think this was much more important for them, this kind of experience, things they did outside school or alongside school.
Okay, so you mentioned that it appears that a lot of those people had entrepreneurial parents, right? So a lot of this mindset, this attitude toward is probably learned from observing them. But what exactly those attitudes are? What mindset is let's not say guarantee, but setting up people for making that kind of fortune?
Sure. First of all, because you mentioned it, of course, there is not a guarantee and there's not an easy recipe. But on the other hand, you can learn from these people. And of course, not all rich people are the same way as not all poor people are the same. But there are some patterns and you can learn something. And I think one very important thing is these people were non-conformists. So that means they enjoyed swimming against the stream, to doing things different than other people. One of the richest of my interviews, he's a multi-billionaire from Germany. He made his money with milk and his yogurt. And he gave me a kind of funny example. It was about cows, because cows are his favorite animals, because he grew rich with milk and yogurt. And he gave me this picture. He told me there's a herd of cows walking along a path, 100 cows. On the left side, there's a green and lush field. And on the right side, there's a field that is not as near as lush and green as this one on the left side. There are only some crumbs of grass. And 99 out of this 100 cows go to the left side, to the green and lush field. But what happens? The grass is eaten very fast. And one cow goes to the right side. And this cow eats and eats and eats. He told me, I'm the cow who went to the right side. Or another one, he was not an interviewer for my book, but I spoke with him for another book that, by the way, was published in Poland right now about rich people. And this was Jim Rogers. Jim Rogers, he's a famous investor, and at the same time he wrote a lot of books, and he became rich when he was very young because he managed to invest in a hedge fund together with George Soros at this time. And this fund had gained 4,200% in the same time when the S&P index in the United States had only 47%. So he became very rich at this time. And he is this what you call a contrarian investor. It means he enjoyed always swimming against the stream. And he told me this story. There was one evening in Manhattan, and he was very young, and he was invited to a fancy dinner with bankers and investors, and all of them were much older than he was. And then one of them said to his neighbor, not very loud, but so loud that everyone could hear it, how could someone be so stupid to invest in Lockheed shares. Lockheed was this time this they produced this aircraft, and they were in a big crisis. Every day you could read bad news in newspapers, and their share price dropped. And he said to his neighbor, "How could someone be so stupid to invest in these shares?" And everyone laughed, but they laughed at him, Jim Rogers, because he was the one who invested in these shares. Later, he became very rich this way. And he said, at this time, I felt very bad when everyone laughed at me. But later, I understood the more people laugh at you and the louder they laugh, the better it is. So, of course, it's not an easy recipe to become rich. But in a way, if you do things the same way and the same things that everyone does, you can't become rich. I tell you maybe an example from my own investments. I became also rich as a contrarian investor. I invested in the Berlin residential market. Here I live in Berlin, the capital of Germany, and I invested in real estate. This was in the beginning of the, so like 20 years ago, I invested there. And everyone told me that it's a very, very stupid idea, because at this time, prices stagnated or even decreased, and rents stagnated or even decreased. And there were a lot of people who had a negative experience with investing in Berlin. And I tried to get a mortgage from Deutsche Bank, and they told me, no, we will not do this. It's definitely not a good idea to invest there, because I invested in this what you call a bad location in Berlin. I found another bank to give me this mortgage, and even I got 100% of the purchase price at this time, even a little bit more. And so I bought this multifamily house with zero equity at this time. And the purchase price was a little bit more than 1 million euros. 10 years later, the situation has changed. Everyone was really bullish about investing in Berlin residential market. Everyone recommended, now you should invest there. This was the time I decided to sell, and I sold it. And I sold it for 4.2 million euros. So I made from zero 4 million, only with this one deal, but I made a lot of this. Another example, you remember the financial crisis 2008 with the insolvency of Lehman Brothers, and only half year later, everyone was in very depressed mood. I bought another multifamily house in Berlin for 1.7 million euros. And then 10 years later, when everyone was bullish about the market, I sold it for 7.5 million. So it was convincing for me when these super rich people told me that they enjoyed swimming against the stream. And when I saw that they became rich as non-conformists, because this fitted to my own experience, for my own investment. So this is only one thing, but I think very important one. Of course, there are others.
Okay, so let me dig a bit into this swimming against the stream, because, well, for sure, there is also a lot of, let's say, stupid ways to swim against the stream. The mere fact that everyone does this doesn't mean doing the opposite thing is necessarily a good thing. So how could people know what points out, for example, a good investment, a good contrarian investment from just a stupid decision, because maybe in such case everyone does something because there is a good reason? How do you differentiate this?
Sure, of course, if you do only always the opposite of this, what everyone does, it could be, of course, very stupid. Not only with in investments. I think there are different kinds of people. The one, I will give you an if I will give you an example, maybe. If maybe you saw it when people wanted to cross the street and there was a red traffic light, but there was no car. You couldn't see any car there. And most of the people, they waited till the traffic light turned green. But this is the majority of people. They don't look, is there a car or not? It's so what's green, go, red, wait. And of course, if you do the different thing, always to cross the street when it's red, yes, of course it's stupid when there's a car. You would be killed very fast. And then of course, doing always the opposite would be crazy. But then there is a third category of people that's, for example, like me. For me, I don't care whether it's red or whether it's green. I look whether there's a car or not. And then I make my own decision. If there's no car, I cross the street, whether it's red or whether it's green. This is the same with investments. Of course, you have to make your own analysis, but it's much easier to find good investments if no one is interested in, or if people tell you it's a bad thing. But you are absolutely correct. It's no guarantee, and it depends how long you will wait. I was always a long-term investor. Long-term, for some people, this means I wait 3 weeks or 3 months. I meant with long time, 10 years plus. So this was my perspective, long time. So this strategy works best if you have a long-term perspective. I'll give you another example. Some years ago, in 2015, I published a book and I recommended that you should invest a part of your investments in the dollar, because my analysis was that in the long term, if it is about the relationship between euros and dollar, in the long time, that the euro will lose. That was my analysis for different reasons. I didn't know how the euro dollar would be next week, next month, but I had the idea that in a long-term perspective, it could be good. At this time, the relation or the currency rate, euro dollar, was 1.36. Today, it's parities. It's 1-to-1. So when you invested at this time, for example, I bought two apartments in Manhattan near Fifth Avenue, and I have to admit this was one of the worst investments that I did. I didn't lose money, but the purchase price is today only a little bit more than it was 10 years ago. So in this way, I analyzed what were the reasons. It was not a good investment. But if I see it from a perspective currency, dollar euro, I gained 36% with this investment, because I was right, not with buying this special 2 apartments, but I was right in my analysis, in my prediction about dollar euro. But I couldn't predict it for a week or for a month, but I had the feeling on a long-term perspective. Or another example for this, when I wrote this book, there was almost no inflation. The inflation rate was less than 1%. But I thought that there is a possibility that we will have inflation. I didn't know when, but because I was very skeptical because of this quantitative easing and the strange zero interest rate policy of the central banks. And so I saw that there is a danger of inflation. And at this time, I recommended to people, if you buy bonds, then you should buy inflation-linked bonds. There's a special type of bonds that are inflation linked. At this time, it was very cheap to buy them. If you would buy them today, it would be much more expensive because today we have the inflation. So it means in the moment when you make an investment, you have always a prognosis about the future, whether you are aware of it or not. But for example, 2004, I bought a lot of gold. Why did I buy the gold? Because I expected that in a long time the gold price will go up, and at this time you could buy it for the kilo for 10 or 15,000 euros. Today it's like 56,000 euros. So you have to make your own analysis. Of course, not only this would be very primitive. Everyone crosses the street always with red, and I will with green, and I will always cross red. That means committing suicide. This is stupid. But make your own analysis, and it's more likely that you will be successful if this is an investment where a lot of people think that it's not interesting or that it's even stupid. So you made a very good point.
Okay, so getting back to the psychological mindset and attitude of rich people, would you say there are any innate traits, psychological traits, that makes getting rich easier? And if so, the ones that you are born with, you might say, psychological traits. And if so, are there any downsides of those particular traits? So, for example, if there would be some innate traits that that allows getting rich easier, what there would be the negative side of this, and if there is one?
Whether you are born with them or whether it's a result of your education and so, this is, I think, it's hard to say. But what is true, when you are maybe 20, 30 years old, it's not easy to change personality traits. But I think there are a lot of people with personality traits that would help them to grow rich, but they don't know about it. And I write my books for this kind of people. Maybe you have all these personality traits that are important to grow rich, but you don't know it. You never thought about it. And I give you another example. You can, my books are not written for people who are looking for an easy recipe. So I have to copy and there's a guarantee. I have to do 1, 2, 3. This is what a lot of people expect. There are so many videos on YouTube and articles. I make you rich. Buy these shares, buy this cryptocurrency, buy this Bitcoin, whatever. I don't believe in this. These people will never become rich in their life because they look for someone who starts to think for them. I like people who make their own decisions, but I will give them food of thought that they can think about it. And here's one example, one personality trait. Every one of my interviewees completed a psychological test, a so-called Big 5 test. And we distinguish between 5 personality traits. And one of these personality traits is openness for new experience. You know, there are some people, if you give them a new idea, they're up. I think it doesn't work. I tried it, or I don't believe in it. So, and there are other people. Oh, maybe I should think about it. I think it's easy to understand that the second type of people, they're more likely to become rich. If you always reject every new idea, I think it's very unlikely that you become rich. Maybe you know this British multi-billionaire, Richard Branson from Virgin. And they called him always Dr. Yes, because his spontaneous reaction, if someone made him the suggestion, was saying yes. And for other people, it's always saying no, why it will not work. And if you know this, and there's a psychological test, I mentioned it that every one of them completed. I completed the same test, and I saw that in this respect, openness for new experience, I was only a little bit better than average, but I was more like being average. It was not one of my strengths. And what was the result? I thought, okay, this seems to be a weakness for you. And the result was, now, if anyone makes me a suggestion, a new idea, and if I have spontaneously the reaction to explain him why it will not work or so, I said, stop, this was your weak point. Start to think not why it could be bad, start to think why it could be good. So this example shows you, if you know your weak points and your strength, if it comes about this personality traits and you compare it with rich people, then you can start to think about your own behavior. Maybe it's difficult to change your personality traits, but if you are aware of your weak points and your strength, I think you can learn a lot from them. And then I think the second part of your question was whether some of these personality traits could not only help, but could at the same time hurt. So, and this is also a very important point. I give you one example. These rich people were very much risk-oriented and very optimistic. I asked every one of them if there's a scale from -5 means total pessimist to +5 would mean extreme optimist, and 0 is neutral. And I asked them, where are you on the scale? Most of them positioned themselves 4 or 5, or some said, no, I'm 7, I'm 8. So, and there were only very few who were pessimists. And of course, it is a precondition because most of them became rich as entrepreneurs, and you will never found your own company if you are not an optimist in a way. Because if you see how likely it is that your company will be successful or not, and if you look only at the statistics, and you know a lot of there are much more entrepreneurs who fail than succeed, then you wouldn't found your company. So optimism is a precondition, but this optimism can hurt as well. I saw it with a lot of, I know a lot of entrepreneurs and rich people, and I saw when there was a crisis in their company, and when the company was in trouble, and when everyone could see, no, this will have a bad outcome, it makes no sense to go on with this business. They stayed optimistic. They invested more and more and get on. And this is a big danger for people. Optimism is good in a way, but it's a big danger. But if you know that it's a danger, then it can help you to think about your own behavior. Because in a lot of self-help books, they will tell you stamina. It's very important that you don't give up. It's very important to succeed. And in a way, it's correct, but in another way, it's wrong, because sometimes it can be very important to know when to stop something and say, okay, this was a bad idea, before you give more and more money in a business that will go in insolvency in the end. So the same is with risk. If you, most of these people took a lot of risk and they were pro-risk, and of course this helped them to win this money. But of course, in a different situation, it can hurt you if you take too much risk. In this way, I'm different than most of rich people. I'm more risk averse, and maybe this was the reason why I founded my company only when I was older, when I was 43 years old. when I would have been more pro-risk, then I think I would have found it much earlier in my life, a company. And I always try to avoid risk. But after I founded my company, I saw that it was an advantage, on the other hand, that I was more, that I was aware of a lot of risks. So what I want to say with this, some of these personality traits can help you on the one hand, but can hurt you on the other hand.
Sure, that's a good point. Okay, so there are obviously some stereotypes about rich people. But as you pointed out in your different study, those stereotypes, the view of the rich people, differ between nations, between countries. So why does this view of super rich people differ between regions or populations, and on what does it depend?
Yes, first of all, let's tell me a little bit more about this kind of research. So we spoke now the last minutes about my doctoral dissertation about the psychology of rich people. But I wrote another book. The English title is The Rich in Public Opinion. And I published 3 scientific papers in economic affairs. By the way, everyone, if you Google economic affairs and my name, you can find them. And 2 of them are free with open access, so everyone can read it. And this, what did I do? I commissioned a poll that was conducted by one of the leading polling institutes in the world, Ipsos Mori. And we asked people in 11 different countries what they think about wealth, what they think about rich people. This was the first scientific research in stereotypes and prejudice against rich people, because there are so many scientific studies about prejudice against black people, against Jewish people, against gay people, against women, even against overweighted people, but there was not a standard textbook about this. This is the book, The Rich in Public Opinion, about stereotypes against rich people, and one thing that was important for me to find out how envious are people in different countries. It's not possible to ask people, are you envious or not? Because almost no one admitted. I ask sometimes, I have a lot of lectures all over the world. And sometimes I ask people on a scale from 0 to 10, when 10 means you're extremely envious and 0 means that you're not envious at all. Where are you? And in most cases, 90% position themselves between 0 and 3. So meaning being not envious. Envy is always the others. They are envious, but I'm not. There's a psychological reason. There's a scientific research in why people are envious, and especially why they don't admit when they are envious. The reason is, if you're envious, for example, someone is much richer than you, it means that you want to have this what he has, that you have a desire to have the same. But then the next question is, why I don't have it? And this can be very uncomfortable for your self-conscious, because maybe the answer is because the other one was smarter. Maybe the answer could be the other one worked harder, or the other one had better ideas. So it could be very uncomfortable. And so people don't admit being envious. And so when we did this research and we asked the questions, it would have made no sense to ask people whether they are envious or not. What we did first you have to have a definition. What does it mean to be envious? A lot of people confuse it with admire someone. But it's different. For example, there's a multi-millionaire and you're not. Then there are two possible reactions. The one is, what can we learn from these people that I can have more success? This was first part of our interview. But the other reaction is, how could I make things worse for him or take something away from him to close the gap between him and me? Not in the way that I improve my own situation, but that I make things worse for him. And this is what I call envy. And so we had questions. I will give you some examples for this question. One question was, or one statement, we confronted our respondents with the following statements. I would prefer to tax millionaires very high. They should pay very high taxes, even if I have no personal advantage from it. This was one statement. Or another statement was, I would like to reduce salaries from top managers, CEO compensation, to reduce it drastically and to distribute it more evenly among his employees, even if everyone would get only $2 more. So this is the same principle, to make situation much worse for someone, even if the others have almost no advantage. Or the third question was so-called Schadenfreude question. Schadenfreude means this is a word from Germany. They use it also in English. It means that you enjoy when other people have bad luck. So the question was, when I hear about a millionaire who made a risky decision and lost a lot of money, I think it serves him right. So this means Schadenfreude. And there was a big difference how people answered to these questions. And there were a lot of there were dozens of questions. And then we could distinguish between three different groups. The one group we called the enviers, social enviers. The other group we called the non-enviers. And there were some in the middle, ambivalent, where it was not so easy to say whether he's envious or not envious. And what we did then, we calculated the so-called social envy coefficient. That means we divided the number or the percentage of envious and not envious people. And the result was the social envy coefficient. And so we could compare how envious are different nations. And I think now you're interested. I spoke about methodology, but first you have to understand it, how we did it. Maybe now you're interested, of course, in the result. And the result was that the most envious people were French people in France. They were at the top, number one, followed by my country, Germany. And then on the other, the least envious people were people in Japan, Vietnam, and South Korea. And this is also important because we had another question that was very interesting. The question was, for some people, it's very important to become rich. How is it for you on a personal level? How important is it for you to become rich? And the average percentage in European countries and in the United States was 28%. 28% of the people said, for me, it's very important or fairly important to become rich. In these Asian countries, it was 58%. So it means 30 percentage points more. The highest percentage was in Vietnam. 76% of the Vietnamese people said it's very important for me to become rich. And by the way, this is the reason why my books about how to become rich are more successful in Asian countries than in Europe. I'll travel next week to Poland. When I come back, I travel mid of the month to Vietnam, and I will spend there 10 days and have a lecture in front of 1,000 entrepreneurs in Vietnam. And I was in China, I was in South Korea. So these people, they are very ambitious to grow rich, and they are less envious for them. For people in Vietnam, for example, rich people are more like role models. How can I learn something from this? Here in countries as in Germany, people are, for them, they are more like scapegoats. If anything negative happens, they look for a scapegoat, and they are sometimes rich people. I didn't make the survey in Poland, but I will do it. I think in the next month, I will have the same survey in Poland, because I'm writing now a book about Poland and Vietnam. They in some ways, a lot of ways they are different, but in some ways Poland and Vietnam have something in common. And so this is my next book about the rising white eagle and dragon. Yes, these are Poland and Vietnam, and so this is the reason why I will have this poll also in Poland. But now I can't tell you about these results.
Sure. Okay, so I wanted to get back for 1 second to your methodology that you said, because, for example, one of the questions you mentioned was regarding taxes. Tak? Would you tax rich people if you wouldn't benefit from this personally? But maybe some people would think, okay, we would want to tax super rich people because we think it would benefit the less situated, the poor people from the margins. And I'm not sure if that would constitute envy necessarily.
Sure, and this is the reason why answering one question like this question with yes doesn't mean that you belong to this category of envious people. Then you belong to this category ambivalent. I can say it. Is he envious or is it not? But it makes a big difference whether you answer all these three questions with yes or with no, or even two of them. And we saw it when we analyzed the answers to all these dozens of other questions. We saw that even with these three questions, whether you answered 2 or 3 with yes or with no, that then the people answered all of these other dozens of questions in a special way. But you are absolutely correct. Answering only one of these questions with yes, it can have a lot of different reasons. Doesn't mean that you belong to this category. Good point.
Thank you again for the interview. I think it was very productive. I encourage everyone of the viewers to comment on everything that was said here. And thanks again. It was a pleasure. Your book is now available also in Poland. Capitalism is not a problem, it is a solution. We will
two books are available.
Okay, yeah. You know? The second one? What is the second one?
I don't know the Polish title, but it was published in with the same publisher, with Freedom Publishing. And this other book, the English title is Dare to be Different and Grow Rich. Secrets of Self-Made People. It was about the topic that we spoke first. I don't know the Polish title, but you can find it.
I'll check it and I will add it into the descriptions if anyone interested.
Okay, so it was a pleasure to speak with you. I will send you the links. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye. Dzięki za uwagę, a jeżeli jesteście zainteresowani dodatkowym fragmentem, w którym dr Zitelmann odpowiada na pytanie, czy i jakie mogą być wady kapitalizmu i czy zgadza się z tym, że kapitalizm może promować na przykład antyspołeczne czy szkodliwe zachowania, to zapraszam na specjalną grupę wyłącznie dla patronów, gdzie poza dodatkowymi fragmentami rozmów możecie również zadawać pytania do naszych rozmówców, przedpremierowo oglądać odcinki, a także uczestniczyć w streamach dla patronów. Do usłyszenia. Hej! Jeśli chcesz być informowany o kolejnych odcinkach, to kliknij dzwoneczek powiadomienia, żeby żadnego nie przegapić. A jeśli chciałbyś pomóc w tworzeniu takich filmów, to zapraszam do wsparcia nas na Patronite. Do usłyszenia.